To obtain the weapon known as the Godsslayer, Chenhu and his friends will have to confront a clan of assassins who worship the eight-headed dragon, the god of Typhoons. But when they finally find the weapon, it will turn out to be nothing like they expected. This will put their entire plan for revenge into question. So, what is it really? Kamikoroshi, Episode 4. 8 Drunken Heads. The forest greeted them with a silence that was unlike any other place. Not the kind of silence that stands before dawn, when birds still sleep but the earth already breathes, preparing for morning. This was a different silence, dense as oiled paper, through which no light passes. The silence carried by those who have just returned from a place where no trees grow. 4 figures sat at the edge of the forest, 3 mortals and 1 god, and for a time, no one said anything. They simply sat, listening as the forest gradually grew accustomed to their presence. First, something small rustled in the bushes to the right. Then, far away and uncertainly, a nightbird cried. Then the wind swayed the tops of the pines, and the world began to resemble the world again. Sifu broke the silence first. He sat with his back against a trunk, legs stretched out, studying his boots with the expression of a man drawing unflattering conclusions. Then he said thoughtfully, as if continuing some long internal conversation with himself. So, hell. I've heard things, of course. That it's dark, that it's frightening, that demons prod sinners with hot pokers and keep records of their transgressions in special scrolls. But no one, not a single person, mentioned that it's so dull. No fire to speak of, no torture with any imagination, just grayness, an old woman with a mirror, and an enormous angry toad. He paused. Honestly, I expected more. Mo did not answer. He stared straight ahead, and in his gaze was that particular expression found in warriors after battle. Not exhaustion and not fear, but something between them. The feeling that the world had grown a few inches tighter and the horizon a few inches further. Tiger sat a little apart, arms crossed, resembling a mountain observing clouds. Without judgment, without impatience, simply observing. Chenhu stared into a fire that wasn't there, simply, at one point. In his hands, he held a strip of leather from his harness, wound and unwound so many times it had begun to fray. Then he said, quietly, without the intonation of a question, like a man pronouncing something that had long become the axis of his existence. The god-killer is held by the assassin clan. The toad sold it to them before her imprisonment. Why? Doesn't matter. What matters is that it's there. Tiger, without changing his posture, said, Why matters? The toad didn't care who she sold it to. The only thing that mattered was one, that the weapon not fall into the hands of the gods. A fishmonger would do. Even, he cast a brief glance at Sifu, a bumbler like this one. Sifu slowly turned his head. Did I correctly understand that the god of war just called me a bumbler? You understood correctly, said Tiger without a trace of a smile. Good, Sifu nodded with dignity. I simply wanted to be certain. Chenhu raised his head. Something in his face, not a smile but the shadow of one, flickered and vanished. This clan is known to me. They once invited me to join them, offered me a place in their ranks. He paused. I refused. And I said so in a way that sent rumors across many lands. People laughed. The clan that failed to draw a rootless mountain fighter to its side. Their authority fell enough that even those who had never heard of them felt it. Mo said quietly, They swore revenge. Yes, Chenhu agreed. The knife at the tournament was a polite reminder. Sifu whistled softly. Polite, right. For a time they were silent. The wind moved through the treetops. The pines swayed as if bowing to someone invisible standing far to the north. The forest floor smelled of pine needles and wet earth, the smells of the living world, which after the smells of hell seemed almost deafening in their ordinariness. Their leader is a strange man, Chenhu continued, almost like a preacher, speaks little, looks at you as though he can see through you and is unimpressed by what he finds. Their patron is the eight-headed dragon, god of typhoons and hurricanes. 8 heads, Sifu repeated. That's rather a lot for one god. Does he have enough neck? Each head symbolizes one style of martial arts, said Chenhu without reacting. For many years, the clan possessed 7. They always sought the 8th. They wandered, searching for that one martial art worthy of completing their 8-fold. And they found it? Asked Mo. By all appearances, said Tiger, they found it. He lowered his gaze to his hands, large warrior's hands, accustomed to a sword's hilt. Perhaps the god-killer itself became that 8th wonder. Mo slowly shook his head. Not necessarily a weapon. For a clan like this, it could have been something else. A teaching, a revelation. Something that cannot be held in the palms but can be carried within. Their goal was above ordinary killing. They wanted to reach such perfection as to kill even gods, the highest step. What assassins have dreamed of since the first blade was ever sheathed. Sifu grimaced. The highest step. Kill a god. He paused. Is it just me who finds this slightly concerning from a personal safety standpoint? You're not a god, Chenhu noted. Yet, said Sifu. But plans change. Mo suppressed a cough. And what's strange about their leader? Asked Sifu, returning to the thread. You said almost like a preacher. What exactly is the strangeness? Chenhu didn't answer immediately. He wound the leather strip around his finger again, studied it for a moment, then said, in that he doesn't merely worship the dragon, he believes he himself is the 8-headed dragon, imprisoned in a human body. He is convinced of this the way only those are convinced of something who have lost their connection to reason entirely. Sifu opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. So he literally believes he is a god? That very 8-headed one? Yes. And no one explained this to him? They explained, said Chenhu. He doesn't listen. Sifu laughed, briefly, somewhat helplessly. How does it come to this? 100 people follow a madman who believes himself the god of typhoons? Tiger raised his head. In his eyes stood something, not mockery, but something resembling the patient understanding of how things are arranged that mortals tend to regard as simple. He spoke, evenly, as one speaks of obvious things. The world is populated by gods no one sees, not because they don't exist, but because they have weakened. He rose, slowly, as a tree rises in wind effortlessly, and walked several steps to the edge of the clearing. He stood with his back to them, gazing where between the pine trunks the sky grew slightly lighter. Not dawn yet, only the first, most timid premonition of dawn. There is no equality in the pantheon, he continued. There are gods who walk the earth in the guise of men, ordinary men. No one suspects them of being gods. They themselves barely remember what they were. Their strength has thinned to the point where they cannot reveal their true face. There are stronger gods, sometimes seen in the sky, a dragon among clouds, a phoenix at sunset, a bird too large to be a bird. On official days, gods appear to people in the form of a man with the head of their beast. But most of the time, they are hidden. Their halls are not here. He fell silent for a moment. Somewhere in the forest, the nightbird cried again. A god's strength is measured not by years and not by victories. It is measured by faith alone. Sifu stopped smiling. When people first learned to make fire, said Tiger, the phoenix was among the mightiest. He was prayed to as a miracle made for mortal hands. When people learned to hunt, the wolf rose beside him. When agriculture came, when people understood that rain is life and drought is death, the turtle grew into a power few could surpass. God of water, rain, plants, birth and passing. He turned, and in the half-darkness only the outline of his face was visible. Heavy, calm. When people began to wage war in earnest, when war ceased to be two villages fighting over a stream and became what it became, they prayed to me. Before every battle, behind every spear. And I was strong. His voice was such that Sifu said nothing, simply watched. But the lion was always the strongest, said Tiger. The sun is seen by all. All pray to the sun. Without water, one can survive. People know how to dig wells. Without fire, one can survive. People know how to dress in furs. Without the sun, no. While the world stands, while dawn rises, the lion is unshakable. He turned back to the trees. And there are gods who found another way. They don't need thousands worshipping. 100 fanatics will suffice. A narrow cult, fierce devotion, and the god lives long, quietly, apart from the pantheon. Such gods are born in sects, in closed communities, where one man convinces the rest that he has found something unavailable to others. The silence after his words was already different, not that first one brought from hell, but the kind that falls when a man has just heard something that rearranges several large stones in his understanding of the order of things. Sifu carefully said, "So their leader, mad or not, their devotion to the dragon is real, and the dragon stands behind them." "Warriors with a god's patronage are a fearsome force," said Tiger simply, "even if the god is small. Even if the man being worshipped doesn't understand what he is." Sifu scratched the back of his head, slowly, thoughtfully. Then looked at Tiger, then at Chenhu, then back at Tiger. "So we're facing fanatics with a dragon patron, convinced of their right to kill gods, and their chieftain is either a madman or actually a dragon in human form." A pause. "And there are 3 of us." Another pause. "I imagine you, the god of war, will simply stand aside and observe. Good battle and all that." Tiger slowly looked at him. "That was a joke," Sifu clarified. "I know," said Tiger. Mo asked, briefly, practically, the way men ask who know how to wait exactly as long as necessary and not a moment longer. "What's the plan? Storming in and taking it won't work." Chenhu was silent for a time, then said, quietly, the way one speaks of something so simple it is almost embarrassing to say aloud. "We drink with them." A pause. "After hell," Sifu said slowly, "I would honestly take a drink. Though, if it's such a furnace down there, remarkable that the demons don't brew sake. The market would flourish." "There's the plan," said Chenhu. Sifu brightened. "I like this plan." Mo looked at one, at the other, at the god of war, who sat silent with the expression of a man who had just had a thought he had not yet decided whether to voice. Then Tiger said, slowly, as if weighing each word, "It might actually work." Mo looked back at Chenhu, at Sifu, who was already clearly thinking of something private and pleasant. Then at Chenhu again. "What have you come up with?" No one answered him. The nightbird called a third time. Dawn somewhere beyond the pines was beginning to define itself, not with light yet, only with warmth, a barely distinguishable hint that the darkness was not eternal, and somewhere beyond the horizon something was already kindling that had no name except morning. The trading city greeted them with smell, not one, 100 at once. Hot oil on braziers, raw fish on counters, spices in sacks against walls, horse dung, wood smoke, the leather tang from workshops, the sweet rot of overripe fruit, and, somewhere behind all of it, a thin note of river water, because the city stood at a river, and the river did not let it forget. Chenhu walked first. Behind him, Mo. Sifu brought up the rear, turning his head with the expression of a man simultaneously overwhelmed by curiosity and slightly nauseated by the abundance of impressions. The street was wide by trading city standards, meaning wide enough for two carts to pass with only minor scraping of their sides. On both sides, shops crowded together, fabric awnings in blue and ochre stripes, beneath which merchants called to buyers with that monotonous persistence found in people who have been doing this from dawn to dusk for 20 years running. A boy dragged a bundle of kindling across the planking. A woman in a dark kimono with white ornament at the collar stood at a stall of pickled vegetables, handling each piece of radish with such concentrated attention as though making an important matter of state. Two old men sat against a wall, drinking tea from clay bowls and watching the passers-by with the complete calm of people who have nowhere to be and no reason to hurry. Sifu drew level with Chenhu. He spoke quietly, not from caution, but because that is how people talk when it is noisy around them and there is no need to shout. So we need 50 barrels of sake. Good sake. Not the kind they pour in cheap taverns that leaves you with a headache by morning and a desire to reconsider your life choices. Real sake. He paused. And we have no money. It's a trading city, said Chenhu. I noticed. Here you can do more than sell. That too I noticed. Only we have nothing to sell, unless you're planning to part with your bow. You can earn. Sifu glanced at him sideways, then looked ahead, then back at Chenhu. How? Chenhu didn't get to answer. Mo stopped, briefly, without words, simply stood still, and both looked where he was looking. A little off the main street, behind a row of fabric stalls, a wide structure of darkened timber rose above the rooftops. From here, only the top was visible, flags on poles, faded red and black, and above them, a post with coins strung on rope, which meant one thing: an arena. Chenhu looked at it for a moment, nodded. Oh no, said Sifu. The arena inside was smaller than it had appeared from outside. As is always the case with things seen for the first time, they promise more than they deliver. The wooden stands 2/3 empty. It was midday. People were trading and working. A few dozen spectators scattered here and there, some with food, some without, talking with that lazy animation found in people who came to kill time and aren't particularly expecting anything worth remembering. On the arena itself, packed sand, darkened from years of absorption, some unremarkable bout was finishing. Two burly men pushing and grunting until one gave way and sat down. The arena manager turned up at the side gate, short, stocky, in a dark jacket with greasy sleeves. He watched the ending bout with the expression of a man who expects nothing to surprise him and little to please him. Sifu approached him with that particular ease of those who know how to talk to strangers, as though they were already acquainted, just hadn't yet gotten around to establishing it. Respected sir, I have good news for you. The manager glanced at him without enthusiasm. Before you stands the winner of the Gods tournament, said Sifu, and gestured back toward Chenhu, who stood at the gate watching the arena. A finalist, the finest warrior the Pantheon has seen in 100 years. He is prepared to perform at your arena. The manager looked at Chenhu, without hurry, then back at Sifu. Many come with such words. Many lie, Sifu agreed. I don't. Even so, the manager shrugged with the air of a man who has not been fooled for years and doesn't intend to start. What do you want? Sifu named a sum. A pause. For one bout? The manager asked again in the tone used when giving someone the chance to hear for themselves what they just said. For one bout, Sifu confirmed. If the lion himself in human form stepped onto this arena, I wouldn't pay that much. Sifu considered briefly. All right, Then put your best against him, the best you have. He let the pause sit. A demon. The manager looked at Chenhu again, this time a little longer. Something stirred in his eyes. Not interest yet, but the beginning of it. If your man wins, he gets the sum. Agreed. Chenhu stepped onto the arena without extra words. He removed the outer layer of his clothing, set his bow and spear at the edge, left only himself, only what he had carried in his hands and body since he could remember himself. The sand underfoot was firm, packed tight, holding the imprints of dozens of feet. The stands stirred somewhat. They sensed something, the way stands do when a man walks out who carries a certain quality of silence. Not emptiness, but focus, the kind that isn't performed. The demon appeared from behind the side gates. It was enormous, taller than a man by a head and more, so broad in the shoulders that the doorway seemed to have released it reluctantly. It walked on two legs like a man, but was built differently. Legs too powerful, neck too short, head. Its head was a ram's, a real one, with heavy coiled horns, each as thick as a grown man's fist. The skin where it was visible was dark, nearly black, glistening. It stepped onto the arena and stopped, regarding Chenhu with small amber eyes that held nothing but one simple intention. Then it lowered its head, horns forward, and walked. Chenhu didn't move, watched, counted. The demon walked, then ran, then charged. The ground beneath its hooves thrummed, and at the last moment, when the horns were already 2 steps away, Chenhu stepped aside. Didn't jump, didn't leap, simply stepped, the way people step aside on a market street to let someone pass, and the demon thundered by, tore through part of the railing and crashed into a post with a crack. The stands gasped. The demon shook itself, turned. In the amber eyes, irritation joined the intention. It advanced again, slower this time, more careful, head lowered, horns carving arcs through the air. Chenhu stood, waited. When the demon was close enough that its heat and something sharp and sour, like overheated metal, hit him full in the face, Chenhu stepped forward and sideways at once, caught a horn with one hand and, using the momentum of the massive body, pulled down and into a turn. The demon didn't fall, too heavy for that, but lost its balance, lurched, and in that moment, Chenhu was behind it, his left arm wrapped beneath its neck and pressing, precisely, without fuss, exactly where one must press to make the body decide it would rather stop. The demon stood, didn't move, breathed, heavily, with a rasp. The stands roared. Chenhu released it, stepped back. The demon turned slowly. The amber eyes regarded him with something that in a human face would have been called an appraising look. Then the demon spoke, its voice low as the creak of an ungreased millstone. You will not kill the shifter. You know this yourself. Chenhu didn't answer. Such a demon is beyond your strength, the demon continued. Go home. Live. Then it turned and walked out through the gates. Chenhu stood in the middle of the arena. The stands were still loud, but he didn't hear them. The demon's words settled into him the way ash settles, slowly, without sound, laying a layer over something that had already been there a long time. The quiet cruelty of those words lay precisely in the fact that there was nothing new in them, only what he had always known. What sometimes rose from the depths in the quietest night hours and looked at him from there. Sifu appeared beside him before Chenhu could leave the arena. He was walking slightly faster than usual, and in his voice was that animation people use when they are covering something else with it. Demons are tricksters, everyone knows that. They live to knock a man off his true thoughts. It's their work. He clapped Chenhu on the shoulder, briefly, without ceremony. Don't let it get to you. Chenhu looked at him. I mean it, said Sifu. And this time there was nothing extra in his voice. Simply, sincerely. Don't let it get to you. They collected the money at the gate. The manager counted out the coins with the expression of a man parting with something dear, but understanding that a deal is a deal. Mo took the pouch, weighed it in his palm, nodded. The sake market turned up in the far part of the city, where the streets grew a little wider and the smell shifted. Less fish, more timber and grain. 50 barrels. The merchant listened first, then asked again, then fell into a long silence with the look of a man watching calculations race behind his eyes. Then said, carefully, the way one speaks when unsure whether to trust one's own luck. 50 barrels. At once. At once, Sifu confirmed. The haggling was brief. Horses and carts came from the neighboring merchant. He hired them out, and the deal was struck quickly, without unnecessary words. When the carts were loaded and the horses harnessed, Mo stood beside Chenhu, looked at the cargo, then at the road leading out of the city into the mountains. What now? Chenhu took the reins. We deliver the sake to them. A pause. Mo turned slowly toward him. We simply deliver sake to the clan that tried to kill you? Yes. Sifu, standing on the other side of the cart, opened his mouth, closed it, then said with the intonation of a man searching for the flaw in this idea and finding that the flaws are quite literally everywhere. Chenhu, they put a knife in your side at the gods' tournament. I know, and we're going to visit them. With sake. Yes, a long silence. All right, said Sifu at last. His voice had the quality of someone who has decided to stop trying to understand what is happening and simply trust the current. All right, fine. Let's go. Mo said nothing, simply took the reins of his cart and fell into line. Somewhere above the city, a bird called. The market noise fell away behind them. The mountains stood ahead, dark even, promising nothing. 3 days and 3 nights the mountain road led them upward. Not the road merchants and pilgrims use. That one was below, in the valley, wide and predictable. This was different. Narrow as a thought one is afraid to think through to the end, winding between boulders and pines as though built by a man who wanted to confuse not enemies, but his own people. The carts creaked on the climbs. The horses moved slowly, snorting, dropping their heads. Sometimes the road vanished entirely, became simply a strip of flattened grass between stones. And then Chenhu climbed down, took the lead horse by the bridle, and led it by hand. Mo did the same with the silent precision of a man who doesn't need to be told what to do. Sifu sometimes helped, sometimes walked alongside talking, mostly to the horses, who, in his conviction, needed moral support no less than people did. The nights in the mountains were cold. Not the pleasant coolness that settles over flatland after a hot day, but real mountain cold, sharp as the edge of a poorly sharpened knife that cuts anyway. They made small fires, cooked rice in a pot, ate in silence. The stars above the mountains were large, the way they are only high above the level of flatland smoke and dust. One night, Sifu stared at them for a long time, then said thoughtfully, I wonder if the lion can see us from up there. No one answered. The fire crackled. The horses shifted in the darkness. On the 3rd day toward noon, the mountains parted, revealing a small flat valley pressed between 2 rocky ridges. And in that valley stood a castle. Chenhu stopped the cart. He had seen different castles, had seen fortified monasteries in the mountains ringed with walls of rough stone, had seen the fortresses of flatland clans, square, low, resembling a fist. This was something else. The castle was enormous and dark, not because the stone was dark, but because it seemed to absorb light, standing in it like something accustomed to existing in shadow and having no need of the sun. The walls rose unevenly, adding floors the way a cliff adds layers, without symmetry, without visible plan, simply in growth. The towers stood not at corners, but wherever they apparently wished to stand, and this made the castle's silhouette resemble something alive, irregular, like the teeth of a predator that grow where they are needed rather than where they would look well. Above the main gates hung a banner. On it, an 8-headed dragon, rendered so that none of the 8 heads looked in the same direction, each toward its own, each with something in its jaws that couldn't be made out from this distance. "Charming place," said Sifu. Chenhu touched the reins. At the gates they were expected before they managed to draw up. That in itself was an answer to a question no one had asked. The clan knew the road, knew when strangers appeared on it. 6 stood 3 to a side of the gates, in dark jackets without markings, short swords at their belts, and those faces on which nothing has been written intentionally. Professional emptiness, the kind trained over years. Chenhu jumped down from the cart. Sifu and Mo stayed on the box. One of the 6, the one standing slightly ahead of the rest, looked at Chenhu, looked at the carts, looked at Chenhu again. Something happened in his face. Not much, barely visible, like the ripple on water from a falling leaf rather than a stone. And he said something quietly, over his shoulder, to the man standing behind him. That man turned and disappeared behind the gates. The pause was long. The horses shifted. The mountain wind dragged a handful of dry needles across the ground. "They recognized us," Sifu said quietly, not moving. "Is that good or bad?" "Depends on what comes next," Mo answered just as quietly. Reassuring. The gates opened. The man who emerged nodded, briefly, without words, and turned back inside. It was an order to follow. Chenhu went first. Mo touched the horses forward. The courtyard inside was paved with dark stone, smooth from years of foot traffic. Along the walls stood training posts with wooden handles worn to a shine, some cracked, rewrapped in leather. Several people stopped to look, not as a crowd, but the way people stop who have been taught not to show curiosity openly, yet curiosity takes its own course regardless. They looked at the carts, at Chenhu, at the carts again. They were led across the courtyard, then along a covered passage, then past several doors. And it was here that Chenhu saw it. A left turn led off to the side, and there, at the end of a short corridor, stood a gate. Not an ordinary one, iron, with crossbars as thick as an arm, riveted so densely the metal appeared solid. On both sides, guards. Not 2, not 4, 8 men standing with that particular stillness found only in those who guard something that cannot be lost. One wore a key at his chest on a forged chain. Just a key, but the kind not hung on ordinary doors. Chenhu looked at those gates for exactly as long as movement permitted. A second, perhaps slightly more. That was enough. He looked away before anyone could notice he had looked longer than he should. The central hall was deep within the castle, a spacious room with a low ceiling that seemed lower still because the heavy beams were blackened and ran crosswise like ribs. The walls, bare stone, no ornament, no painting. Only at the far end, where the throne stood, an enormous cloth bearing the same image of the dragon as the banner above the gates. 8 heads, 8 pairs of eyes, and again, each head looking in its own direction. Before the cloth sat a man. Chenhu had seen him once before, from a distance, at a competition where the assassins had demonstrated their art. He hadn't held his gaze on him long then. Now he looked. The man was not young, 60 years or more, with that particular leanness of old men who have moved all their lives and not stopped. Face flat, cheekbones high, eyes, dark and still, like 2 lakes on a windless day. Dressed simply, dark robes, no marks of power, except that he sat on the throne and was silent in a way that filled the entire space of the hall. Then he spat, simply, without preamble, to one side, and sat straight. "A dragon, then," said Sifu barely audibly, almost to himself. Convenient, imagining yourself the god of typhoons. At least you don't have to prove it with fire from your mouth. You spit. There's your hurricane. I suppose if I whistle, I'm the god of air. Mo stepped lightly on his foot. Sifu fell quiet. The man on the throne looked at Chenhu. Why have you come? Not a question, a statement, pronounced with the intonation of a man uninterested in the question itself, only the answer. To settle a disagreement, said Chenhu, after the tournament. A knife in the side is a poor way to maintain an acquaintance. The man looked at him without expression, then said, evenly, without irritation, the way one speaks of something so obvious that anger at it would be strange. We are an assassin clan. If we had wanted to kill you, you would not be standing here. The knife was a greeting, simply a reminder, so you wouldn't forget old acquaintances. I didn't forget, said Chenhu. That is precisely why I'm here. Silence. I have a different enemy, Chenhu continued. A serious one. Fighting on two fronts is wasteful. I came for peace. I have no need to look over my shoulder while I move forward. The man, the dragon, tilted his head slightly. Something passed through the dark eyes. Not warmth, but interest. The kind a hunter has when prey behaves unexpectedly. I have heard about what happened at the tournament. About your enemy, too. A pause. Rumors vary. Some say he is not simply a demon. They say he is pure evil, the like of which this world has not seen. They say he is stronger than all the demons that have been, stronger even than the first of them. Sifu swallowed. Quietly, but in the silence of the hall it was audible. So they say, Chenhu agreed. And you go to him, said the dragon. Not condemnation, more the look given to a man who jumps into a river in flood. Alone. With these two. He swept his gaze over Mo and Sifu with an expression that was not insulting, simply appraising, and the appraisal was honest. Out of solidarity, said Chenhu, you will then all the more not stand in my way. It is difficult enough as it is. The dragon laughed, not loudly, briefly, like a man caught laughing against his will. You are out of your mind if you think you will kill him. Perhaps, said Chenhu, but no more so than a man who believes himself a dragon imprisoned in a human body. The silence in the hall changed. The dragon looked at Chenhu for a long time. In the dark eyes there was no anger. There was something sharper than anger, something with no simple name, a mixture of recognition, self-directed mockery, and something resembling respect that one does not wish to acknowledge. Then he said, slowly, with a slyness he didn't conceal, well, and what are you planning to use as an offering? Chenhu nodded to Mo. Mo went out. A minute later he returned, pulled the covering from the nearest cart visible through the open doors. The barrels stood in rows, dark wood, hoops of greened bronze. The dragon looked. Then, back at Chenhu. Something in his face shifted, barely visible, the way a face changes when a man sees something he didn't expect and hasn't yet decided how to feel about it. You think we're so easily taken? He said, and in his voice there was no real threat, more professional caution. We are assassins. We invented every poison in the world. We cannot be tricked by something slipped in secretly. Then I will drink with you, said Chenhu, from every barrel, first. A long pause. The dragon looked at him, then at the barrels, then back at Chenhu, then laughed, genuinely, more fully than before. From every barrel! He repeated with that particular delight found in people when a gesture is so absurd and simultaneously so honest that anger at it becomes impossible. From every barrel, then. Good. Agreed. He clapped his hands. The guards at the hall doors shifted slightly apart. People began to move, toward the tables, toward the carts, on various errands. The tension that had held in the hall since their arrival didn't disappear, but shifted, the way a stone shifts on the edge of a cliff, still in place, not yet fallen, but the angle already different. Mo and Sifu began opening the first barrels. Sifu, wrestling with a lid, said, half to himself but loudly enough to carry, "Always wanted to see a dragon up close. They say the scales are like moonlight, and the eyes, like two fires in the dark." The dragon glanced at him. "People say many things. And yourself? Do the scales itch? Or do you get used to it?" Sifu continued with such an expression of genuine interest that it was impossible to tell whether he was mocking or not. "I have no scales," said the dragon with the evenness of a man this question does not touch, or who is working very hard to appear as though it doesn't. "Not yet," Sifu agreed, "but that's temporary. The body is a prison, a shell, all of that. When the true nature breaks through, we'll all need to make room." The dragon looked at him, for a long time, with an expression difficult to read cleanly, somewhere between irritation and that helpless amusement sometimes produced by people so guileless that anger at them arrives only with a delay. "You," said the dragon at last, addressing Sifu, "are either very brave or very stupid." "Usually the second," Sifu replied pleasantly, "but sometimes they coincide." Mo set the first cup before Chenhu. He took it, looked at the dragon, raised it, and drank. Set the cup down, nodded toward the barrel. The dragon's servant poured for everyone. At the table it grew a little quieter, with that silence found at the start of a feast, when people have not yet drunk enough to forget who they are sitting with, but already enough to begin forgetting why it matters to remember. They drank for a long time, not the way people drink at celebrations, with songs, with noise, with toasts that grow longer as the sake in the barrels diminishes. They drank differently, methodically, with that particular seriousness of people accustomed to treating everything as a matter of business, including drinking. The assassins drank in silence or spoke little, short phrases, nothing extra. The fire in the braziers crackled. Outside, the mountain wind drove dry grass across the courtyard. Sifu edged toward Mo quietly, the way people move when they have something to say, but not in front of everyone. He sat beside him, set down his cup, looked into it, then said under his breath, without turning his head, "I'm worried about him." Mo didn't ask who, simply waited. "He doesn't drink," Sifu continued just as quietly. "I mean, he's drinking, I can see that, but he's not used to it. From every barrel, that's 50 cups, Mo, 50. I've watched strong men go down after 20. Right now, he looks like a man holding on through sheer stubbornness, without realizing that stubbornness runs out before the sake does." Mo looked at Chenhu. He sat across from the dragon, straight, without support, holding his cup the way one holds something one doesn't trust but cannot put down. His face had that quality it takes on when a man is concentrating on doing something unpleasant and has no intention of showing that it is. "I see it," Mo said quietly. "And what do we do when he goes down?" "He won't go down." "You're certain?" Mo was silent for a moment. "No." Sifu exhaled and looked into his cup again. Reassuring. Second time today. At the table, meanwhile, a conversation was underway. The dragon drank unhurriedly, with that dignity of an old warrior who has drunk a great deal in his time and is surprised by neither strength nor quantity. He spoke, more and more freely, as people speak when sake begins working not on the feet, but on the tongue. He talked about the clan, not secrets, simply the things one discusses with guests one hasn't yet decided to call one's own, but but had stopped counting as strangers. Chenhu listened, and at the right moment asked, as though it were simply one more question in a row of others, neither more important nor more tedious. "Did you find it? The eighth style?" The dragon set down his cup. The pause was brief, but the kind in which much fits. Something passed across the old man's face. Not wariness, but something deeper. Pride that doesn't want to show itself and shows anyway, because it is too large to stay contained. He looked at Chenhu, then said, slowly, with the weight of someone speaking of something that changed everything, "We found it." "And what is it?" asked Chenhu. The dragon took his cup again, turned it in his fingers. "Such that with it our clan can destroy even gods." He said this without boasting, simply as a fact, the way one states the weight of a burden already lifted and precisely known. 8 heads of the dragon, 8 styles. Now, 8. Complete. Chenhu nodded, took his cup, drank, and understood everything. This was it. Not merely a weapon in an iron case behind locked gates. This was something the clan carried within themselves, something that gave them the right to call themselves complete. The God Killer, not simply a sword. It was the 8th head of the dragon, and it was here, in this hall, in these people, and somewhere else. Behind those iron gates in the corridor, in a case resembling a sarcophagus, its embodiment was kept. Chenhu set his cup down evenly, without hurrying. Time passed. The fires in the braziers settled, burned lower. The assassins drank and talked, more freely now, louder. Someone laughed at the far end of the table. Someone dozed off, leaning against a neighbor. The guards at the doors still stood, but with that heaviness in the shoulders that says a great deal. The sake had done its work here too. Sifu watched. He saw the dragon refill his cup, more slowly than before, saw his gaze grow heavy, saw the assassin to his right no longer tracking the table but simply sitting, his face attentive and then not, the way faces go at the very border of sleep. Sifu quietly checked on Chenhu. He sat with half-closed eyes, and there was such convincingness in this that Sifu for a moment genuinely couldn't tell whether he was pretending or not. Then Chenhu, without opening his eyes, gave the barely perceptible nod. Sifu looked at Mo. Mo rose, quietly, without the bench creaking, with that economy of movement that only comes to those who have spent many nights in places where an extra sound costs a life. They left the hall and entered the corridor. Outside it was dark. The mountain night had arrived unnoticed while they sat at the table, and now stood around them dense and moonless, only the stars above the courtyard giving something resembling light. The corridor to the left. Chenhu walked first, unevenly, slightly, the way people walk who are holding on but with difficulty, and Sifu walked alongside, ready to catch him if needed. At the iron gates, 2 torches burned. The guard, the 8 men who had been here during the day, was different now. Not 8, 3. The rest had apparently also been at the table. These 3 stood, but with that heaviness in the shoulders that speaks plainly. The sake had done its work here as well. Sifu said something to them, quietly, with that disarming ease he could deploy with people at the most unsuitable moments. Exactly what, Mo didn't catch. But 2 of the 3 guards laughed. Then one of them closed his eyes and didn't open them quickly. Then the second slowly slid down the wall, holding his spear with the expression of a man who has simply sat down for a moment. The third was still holding on, watching Sifu with that stubborn effort of someone who knows he is supposed to be watching, but no longer quite understands why. Mo lifted the key from him, carefully, without jerking, the way one takes something from a sleeping child. The gates opened heavily, with a long metallic exhale. The way things open that haven't been opened in a long time and are not glad to be open now. Beyond them was a corridor, short, without torches, only at the far end something glowed faintly, the way stone glows that has absorbed someone else's light over the years. They entered. In the center stood an altar, undecorated, without offerings, simply a flat stone on 4 legs, and on it, a case. Enormous. The length of a man, of darkened wood, with iron strips along the sides. Resembling a sarcophagus, Sifu had thought precisely that earlier, and thought it again now, and for some reason it made him mildly uneasy. Sifu and Mo exchanged a glance, then took hold of the lid from both sides and lifted. Inside, on worn black cloth, lay a sword. Enormous. The length of a man, wide at the base, narrowing toward the end. Not gradually, but sharply, the way a tongue of flame narrows. The metal was dark. Not dark from rust or age, but dark from the beginning, as though it had been forged not from ordinary iron, but from something that only pretends to be iron. The hilt was wrapped in leather, old, but not worn, as though the sword had been held many times, yet always carefully, with that particular regard given to things that have no need to prove their worth. "It's enormous," said Sifu quietly. Then, after a pause, "Whoever owned this had something to compensate for." Mo didn't answer. He looked at the sword with the expression of a man who has thought about something for a long time, and now, seeing it exist, doesn't know whether its existence makes things easier or harder. Chenhu reached out his hand. "I wouldn't." The voice came from behind, even, without anger, without hurry. The voice of a man who is not surprised, who had perhaps been waiting for precisely this. They turned. In the doorway stood the dragon, sober, completely sober, with that clear, sharp gaze in which there was not the slightest trace of what had been drunk. He looked at Chenhu, at the case, at the outstretched hand, and in his dark eyes stood something that was not anger, something older than anger, something with no name except one. He had known. He had known from the very beginning and had waited and watched and allowed until this moment. "I knew you would come for it," said the dragon. "From the very day I heard what you said to the lion at the tournament. Someone told you. Someone revealed to you that there exists a weapon capable of killing gods." A pause. "But the sword stays here. It is mine. And the matter is not that I intend to kill anyone. The matter is that I hold it, and that alone makes me what I am. Equal to gods. Above gods." He looked at Chenhu directly, and in that gaze was the quiet implacability of a fanatic, which is more frightening than any fury. "This I will not give up." The dragon stood in the doorway, and the silence he brought with him was not the silence between people when there is nothing to say. It was the silence of a man who has already said everything inside himself. Long ago, long before this night, long before they had arrived with their carts and their sake, and was simply giving the others time to catch up. Chenhu lowered his hand, not hastily, simply lowered it, looked at the dragon, then at the sword, then at the dragon again, with that expression found in people when they are looking not at an obstacle but through it, to where they can already see what comes next. "You didn't drink," said Chenhu. "No," the dragon agreed, "not from a single barrel. From the first cup, the rest was water. We have people skilled in substitution." He said this without triumph, simply a fact. "I respect your cunning, truly. 50 barrels, drinking personally from each one. It was elegant." A pause. "But not enough." Sifu stood slightly behind and to the right of Chenhu, where people stand when they don't yet know whether they'll have to fight, but are already preparing. He was silent, for the first time all evening, genuinely silent, without a single remark, without a single joke. That in itself was a bad sign. Mo stood at the altar. The lid of the case was in his hands, heavy, wooden, banded with iron. He held it the way one holds something that is not yet a weapon, but could become one at the right moment. The dragon took one step forward. One. Slow, without menace, the way people step who have nowhere to hurry. I am not your enemy, Chenhu. I never was. The knife at the tournament. Yes, that happened. But we are even. You shamed the clan. The clan answered. The account is closed. He stopped a few paces away, folded his hands, simply, without posturing. The sword I will not give up. Not because I need to kill gods, because while it is in my possession, I am their equal. Do you understand? Not above them, not stronger, equal. For the first time in all the years of this clan's existence, we are equal to what we worship. That is not something one gives away. Chenhu listened. And while he listened, he watched the dragon. The way he stood, the way he held his hands, the way his eyes moved, not across the room, but across him, Chenhu, with that attentiveness of people ready for the possibility that the conversation may at any moment become something else. You knew I would come for it, said Chenhu. You were waiting. Yes. And you opened the gates anyway. Yes. Why? The dragon was quiet for a moment. Something passed across his face, quickly, like a cloud's shadow across water. And when he spoke again, there was something different in his voice. Not softer, different. Because I wanted to look at you, at the man who goes to kill such a demon. A pause. I have seen many warriors, many. In 60 years, hundreds, thousands. I know what a man looks like who goes to die and believes he goes to win. That is most of them. He looked at Chenhu. You are different. You know what you are walking into, and you walk anyway. That is rare. That is... He didn't finish, shook his head. It doesn't mean I will give up the sword. Sifu couldn't hold back. So you respect him but won't give the sword. Do you understand that sounds like saying, I love you but I won't marry you? The dragon looked at him. That was a metaphor, Sifu clarified. A poor one, I'll grant. You've become tiresome, said the dragon. Without malice, simply a statement. I hear that often, Sifu replied, usually just before something explodes. And then something changed in the air. Not a sound, not a movement, simply something that happens in the second before everything changes. The dragon stood where he was, but his face changed. Slowly, the way the face of a man changes who has been holding something back for a long time and has stopped. Not anger, something deeper than anger. Something with no name in the human language, because people are not accustomed to naming what happens when a being that was a god for thousands of years finally stops pretending otherwise. No one, said the dragon quietly. Not one of you believes. He spoke evenly. It would have been more frightening if he had shouted. Not a single person in all these years. Everyone looked. Everyone saw. An old man who imagined himself a dragon. A madman. A fanatic. His voice grew quieter still. But I remember. I remember the sky. I remember the smell of a cloud from inside. I remember how the earth looks from a height where birds no longer fly. I remember each of the 8 jaws, each of the 8 voices within. You think this is madness, but madness is remembering what never happened. And I remember what did. No one spoke. I am tired, said the dragon, And in those two words was something that made the silence complete. Tired of explaining, tired of proving, tired of being a man no one believes. He looked at his hands, old hands, a warrior's hands, knotted, calloused in the places where calluses form on men who have lived a life with weapons. Perhaps you are right. Perhaps I am simply an old soldier who lost his mind and invented a past that never was. Perhaps. He raised his eyes. But then why do you need the sword? If I am a madman, then my weapon is worth nothing. And if I am right, he didn't finish. And at that moment, the typhoon began. Not outside, not beyond the castle walls, inside. It was like the snapping of something that had been held too long. The air in the corridor shuddered, not from wind, but before the wind, from what precedes wind when nature is still deciding what it intends to do. Then, sound. Not a cry, not a crash, something between them, many-voiced, as though 8 voices had simultaneously pronounced one word in different registers, and the word was not a word but a command, and the command was not to a person but to the elements. The dragon was changing. It was not fast, and that was precisely why it was frightening. What is fast you can fail to see. This, they saw. The skin on his hands rippled like water before a storm. The silhouette began to grow, not upward at first, but outward, in all directions at once, the way circles spread across water. The dark robes tore and fell away. Something beneath them moved, alive, enormous, something that had never fit within human outlines and had always known it, and had simply endured. The ceiling of the corridor cracked. The stones split. Sifu stepped back. Mo didn't move. But the lid of the case in his hands had gone white from the pressure of his fingers. The dragon ceased to be a man. 8 heads, each the size of a cart, each looking in its own direction, as on the banner, as on the cloth in the hall, as on the coin above the arena gates. Only now it was not an image. It was alive. The scales, dark, nearly black, with a blue cast where the torchlight caught their edge. 8 jaws opened simultaneously, and from them came not fire. Wind came. Not simply wind, a typhoon compressed to the dimensions of a corridor, and by that compression made 100 times more terrible than it would have been in open sky. The torches went out instantly. In the darkness, the sound of stone tearing. The corridor walls spread apart the way fabric spreads when torn from both ends. Something fell from above, heavy with a crash. Dust. Cold. That particular cold carried by typhoons, not merely the absence of warmth, but the presence of something that destroys warmth. Chenhu, Sifu's voice in the darkness, not frightened but sharp, focused, the way a voice becomes when fear transforms into action. Either you do something, or we are simply going to be erased by a typhoon. Choose quickly. Chenhu was already moving. He found the case in the darkness before he had time to think. By hands, by the memory of where it had stood, by that particular instinct developed in people who have spent a life in mountains where darkness is not a metaphor, but a reality one must know how to work with. His fingers found the hilt. The sword was heavy. Not the way large weapons are heavy, that even, predictable weight one adjusts to after a few strikes. Differently. It was heavy the way something is heavy that has its own opinion about who is holding it. For one moment, one brief, Chenhu felt the hilt warming in his palm. Or it was not warmth, something else, something with no word. He took the sword in both hands, turned toward the sound. The 8 heads of the dragon glowed in the darkness, not brightly, not like torches, but the way an animal's eyes glow when someone else's light catches them obliquely. 8 pairs, each its own. Chenhu saw them all at once, because in such moments vision does what it cannot do in ordinary life. sees everything simultaneously, without focus, without hierarchy. He did not wind up. A wind-up is for those who doubt, who take a run because they fear that without it they won't have enough. Chenhu did not doubt. He simply threw the sword, the way one throws a spear one trusts, with the rotation of the body, with the transfer of weight, with that exhale that replaces any battle cry. The sword left into the darkness, rotating, cutting through the wind that tried to stop it, and entered where it was thrown, into the heart of the dragon. The silence did not come immediately. First, a sound that had not existed before, something between a cry and thunder, something that does not fit entirely into the human ear and is therefore experienced as pain before it is experienced as sound. Then, a fall. Not fast, slow, the way trees fall that have stood a long time, first a sway, then the going, then an impact that shook the floor underfoot and shook stone dust from the ceiling. Then silence. Real silence. Sifu was breathing in the darkness. It was audible. Mo, not audible. Mo breathed so that he couldn't be heard, but Chenhu knew he was there. The dust settled. Somewhere beyond the ruined corridor walls, in a gap between stones, the first gray light pushed through. Not dawn yet, only its herald, only a hint. And then the sky split open. Not a metaphor, literally. The roof above the central courtyard of the castle went upward the way a pot lid goes when the pressure inside exceeds what the metal can hold. Stone, timber, roof tiles, all of it flew and scattered, and in the gap that formed, in the black night sky above the mountains, light appeared. Golden, heavy. Not the light given by the moon or stars, the kind given by wrath. The voice came from above, and it was a voice at which stone obeys and water stops. Not loud. Loudness had nothing to do with it. Simply, the kind one cannot not obey with the entire body, with all the bones, with everything in a person that is not human. Show yourself. Killer. The lion. Chenhu didn't move for a second. Then, Mo was already beside him, shoulder to shoulder, without words. Sifu on the other side, also without words. And that silence was more eloquent than any words. The golden light flooded the courtyard through the breach, and in that light everything was visible. Ruined walls, fallen beams, the dark mass of what the dragon had been, now motionless. And the sword. Jutting from the motionless mass hilt upward, like a torch without fire. There, said Chenhu quietly. They ran, into the darkness, into the depths of the castle, toward where the walls still stood, and where the darkness was real, not flooded with the gold of someone else's wrath. Behind them, sound. The lion was searching. Without hurry, with that methodical thoroughness of one who knows, there is nowhere to go. The wall ahead exploded outward, not from their effort, from another. Through the breach stepped Tiger, enormous in his true form. Not a man with a tiger's head, but something greater. A tiger shaped not by the natural order, but by war. He looked at the three of them. They looked at him. Then he raised a paw and raked his claws across the air, and the air parted. A portal, dark, with edges that trembled the way the edges of a wound tremble. Now, said Tiger, only that word. They jumped, all three. Behind them, a crash. The lion had found the place where they had just stood. Chenhu managed to hear, already through the closing portal, the lion bringing down the wall, stone flying, the golden light flooding everything that remained of the castle. And a voice, the last thing that came through the narrowing darkness of the portal. Quiet, frightening precisely in its quietness. For the first time in all the existence of this world, a mortal has killed a god. A pause. Long. I will find you. The portal closed. Darkness. Silence. The smell of pine needles and wet earth. Forest. The same clearing, as though nothing had happened. Only the sky above the pines was different. Not calm, not indifferent. A sky that knows. A sky that has remembered. Chenhu stood, breathed. In his right hand, the sword. He had brought it through the portal with him, without thinking. Simply the hand had not let go. Heavy, dark, the one that kills gods. He looked at it for a moment, then lowered it. Point into the earth, hilt upward. Simply stood beside it. Sifu sat down directly on the ground. Didn't fall, sat, with dignity, with the expression of a man who has made a conscious decision to occupy a horizontal position. Looked at the sky, then at the sword, then at Chenhu. Well, he said at last, a god is dead. The lion is enraged. We have the sword. A pause. Is this a victory? Chenhu didn't answer. He looked at the dark sky above the pines, toward where beyond the clouds, beyond the stars, beyond everything visible, something invisible now stood that knew his name. Mo stood beside him, said nothing. In his silence, there was neither relief nor triumph, only what remains in people when they understand they have crossed a line beyond which everything becomes different, without return, without the possibility of pretending it hadn't happened. The lion will find us, Mo said at last. Not a question, a statement. Yes, said Chenhu. And then what? Chenhu took the sword, lifted it, felt again that weight, alive, not indifferent. Looked at it for a long time, the way one looks at something just received and not yet knowing whether it will save or destroy. Then, forward, he said. The forest was silent. The wind did not move the branches. Somewhere very far away, so far that it was more sensed than heard, something rumbled. Not a storm, not a rockfall. Something with no name among the sounds of nature, because it was not a natural sound. It was the sound of the lion searching, methodically, without hurry. The way one searches who is in no rush, because time is on his side. It always had been. Thank you for watching the episode. Write in the comments, how will Chenhu, a hand-to-hand martial artist, be able to wield a sword if he has never even held one before, not even during the tournament?